Jim Napolitano is the creator of Nappy's Puppets. He's known throughout the United States as one of the leading shadow puppetry artists performing today. In addition to performing his uniquely hilarious live shows all across the country, he's also done film and TV work for shows like Between the Lions, Wienerville, and most recently, The Walking Dead: The World Beyond. I talked to Jim Nappy Napolitano about his creative process and puppetry career on this episode of Under the Puppet.
You're listening to Saturday Morning Media. And now, back to our show.
Welcome to the show that is preserving puppetry through the personal stories of professional puppeteers. My name is Grant Pachoco, and this is Under the Puppet. Well, Jim Nappy Napolitano, welcome to Under the Puppet.
Oh, thank you very much. It's so nice to be here.
I'm super excited to talk to you today. And I'm such a fan of your work and everything you do. So I'm excited to dig a little deeper in it, as it were. Do you remember your first exposure to puppetry growing up?
I do, but it's in a roundabout way. I, of course, watched Sesame Street and all those kinds of things, and a big fan and very influenced by Jim Henson. But funny enough, it goes all the way back to my sophomore year of college, where I remembered my first experience as a third grader. So this is a really unusual story, and I don't know if shall we go forward with that? Or?
Let's do it. I want to hear it.
So as a freshman at the University of Connecticut, UConn has a puppet arts program. And at the time, they were having a professor retire, Frank Ballard, who founded the program in the 70s, and they were not going to hire. They weren't going to replace anybody the puppetry program was just going to go away. And so the puppet arts students and many people from around the world wrote letter writing camp. So here I am, an acting major, and I'm just looking for trouble. And I see all these people congregating, having meetings, and we're talking about letter writing camp. What are you guys doing? I say. And boy, that's when my life changed. And so I got involved with that, most political I've ever been. And I helped Heather Ashe and Tim Lagasse and a lot of great puppet arts majors bring the university to their senses and hire a new professor. After all of this, I decided, well, I better take a class. And the first class I took was shadow theater as an acting major. And it just blew my mind. And the connection to my younger days of puppetry is it turns out my first class with Bart Roccoberton in shadow puppet class he said, oh, this is something I did with students. I taught kids and elementary school students. And then I realized as I was taking this as an 18, 19-year-old that I had done it as an 8-year-old, this very same workshop. And then I said, Bart, did you teach around Connecticut? He said, oh, yeah. I said, did you go to Simon Lake School in Milford, Connecticut? He goes, oh, the submarine. So it turns out that I had taken the same class twice, and I got it right the second time as a 19-year-old. So that is kind of like, I always was aware of the puppetry thing, but I was on my way towards a musician or an actor, and I did like 2 years of acting, and then I switched to puppetry. And that was my roundabout way about how I found puppetry.
Wow, that is incredible. Now you say that you were headed towards musician. Did you start playing an instrument as a kid? And you, acting too? Were you performing as a kid as well?
I was more of a musician as an elementary school student. Back in my day, kids went K through 8, no middle school. But around middle school age or fourth grade, you were allowed to take instrumental lessons. And I ended up, I don't know how I chose it or if it was thrust upon me, but I ended up playing the saxophone. And the first day I could play Mary Had a Little Lamb. I had this wonderful musician, this wonderful teacher, and I ended up joining the band fourth through eighth grade, and then into high school, and all the way through high school, and I dabbled in choir. And in high school, I did acting, but because I was in band, that happened first, and all the football games and stuff. All the seniors thought I was really nice guy. I would say cool, but I wasn't cool. But all the seniors took me under the wing, and so then when drama came up, they're like, "You should come out for drama." And I did drama for 2 years. And then we had a new professor of drama come in, and she was spectacular, Pat Howell. And then we started getting really serious, and we did all the musicals. We did the West Side Story and the Godspell and the Fiddler on the Roof. And so this combination of, well, I could be a musician, or I could, go to UConn and learn instruments, or I could be an actor. And it turns out that I was not quite good enough to be either. I also did a high school, garage band, of course. That kept me out of trouble. The greatest thing about the arts that I can say is it kept me and a lot of people off the streets and out of trouble. So you have no time when you're learning rehearsals or tech week or whatever to get into shenanigans that you would get up to otherwise. So that really saved my bacon. But yeah, I switched to acting, went to UConn. My orientation at UConn, I'm going to talk about UConn a lot, but there are other places to study puppetry. That I don't want. There was this kind of joke going around about the UConn Mafia, the UConn Puppet Mafia, but it's not the only place. It's a wonderful place to study puppetry. But at college, I was a mundane acting major. They say there's no small roles, only small actors. Well, I am neither small nor a very good actor. I got all the small roles, and I can attest to that. If you look through my resume, I was waiter number two and door opener, cop number. So I realized that the acting program was highly favored toward the graduate students, and as an undergraduate student, that I was just there to, every now and again there was some really great work being done, but by the end of my second year, I had to audition to go into third year acting, and the teachers all said, "We think you should stay. We want you to come back to the program. You're going to be a great character actor. You're going to be a great Falstaff." And I am 19, 20, and Falstaff is 40, 50, 60. I said, what am I going to do for 20 years? Wait tables? So much of theater is dependent upon body type and look and age and so on and so forth. Puppetry is not like that, where you can play any role and you can be anything. And not only that, but in puppetry, you control so much more. And I don't know if I'm a control freak. That's a big joke that we're all control freaks. But as much as I love the theater, there's so much wasted time in rehearsal. And there's so much time in getting things together and technical rehearsals. When I get the chance to be my own writer and director, and I get to paint, sculpt, cut, do everything, and I rise to success or fall. It's all my own fault and it's all my own responsibility. So I definitely feel like I had a great combination of really solid acting training from 2 years of being an acting major and then being able to switch over to the puppetry program. So, I got some lovely movement, if you can believe it, movement training, like dance and period dance, and that is all instrumental in bringing an inanimate object to life. Movement is the breath of the puppet.
And you'd recommend that puppeteers take some acting and movement and stuff, would you? I don't know, but
Absolutely.
seems like you would.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would recommend that people take acting, study it any way they can, but I wouldn't recommend that you spend a lot of money. That's You're going to find out by the end of this podcast. You're going to find out I'm a cheapskate. But yeah, pay attention. Look who's good. Look who's not. I mean, formalized acting, it's all very nebulous to me. But I'd much rather be a part of a vaudeville class. And I guess that's, I much rather take a clowning, maybe because I've had a little bit of the acting and I got that basis. But there's so many other skills besides the acting. The acting was so confining. The theater was all about formulas and the way you do things. And there was like sense memory and you put your own self into the character. But when I took puppetry, when I studied with Bart Roccoberton, and I said to him, what if I take typing paper, boys and girls, was this thing we used to put pre-computers. So what if I take typing paper and color it in with colored pencils and maybe 2 layers? And Bart, the teacher, this professor of puppetry, goes, I don't know. You should try it and let me know. And I thought, I can learn with my teacher. I could teach my teacher something. That's amazing. So it just took off, and my enthusiasm for puppetry was just renewed there. But yeah, anything you can learn. It doesn't have to be acting. puppetry involves so many of the arts. So always, sewing and painting and drawing and all these things. Yeah. So
Well, you mentioned performing, growing up and your interest in music and acting and stuff. Were your parents or your family creative while you were growing up?
um my dad is a salesman and my dad is very funny, so I got my comedy from him. So there is that, and a hard worker. And my mom, when they were first starting out, my dad was selling things, and my mom would do the sign displays at these little grocery stores before the bigger grocery stores. So she would draw like George Washington and cherry pie filling sales poster and stuff. And I'm really sad that I can't get my mom right now that she has the time to come and play and come and create. She does a little bit of sewing, but believe it or not, they were so supportive, and I think they have a sense of that of art being important. Um, because I don't know, I went from being an acting major, which is really whoa, very very chancy, to being a puppeteer, and I said no no no, I can make things happen. I don't have to wait for things. But my dad is really funny, but he's also very annoying. He's a stone breaker, which is fine, and but he doesn't like to let you get to the joke without a lot of work. He doesn't lead you to the joke. He'll lay out a joke over 20 minutes, leaving the room, coming back, giving you another little clue. And at one point, I don't know if he's going to listen to this, but I had to tell him, and I feel terrible. I said, Dad, you got to knock this off because you're getting to the point where I'm worried about whether you all got all your marbles. And if you keep doing these wackadoo, incongruous jokes, you're going to end up in the home early. That's the bottom line. Like, knock it off, or say LOL, or what do the kids do? Like, let us know you're joking. But yeah, my parents were wonderfully supportive, and they are creative in their own way. My mom is a hard worker, but she was the first part of my life a homemaker, and then a paraprofessional, and then she got tired of kids and their lack of manners as the time went on, and and so she got to retire, and that's good.
Yeah. Well, and I know you mentioned that there's other places besides UConn, but I did have a few other UConn questions,
Yeah.
because the mafia is making me ask them. Um, I'm kidding. But what other classes did you take there? I mean, you mentioned this shadow class, but what other things did you learn while you were there?
So I graduated in 2 years, and there were so many requirements that were 200 level that I had to finagle my way and say, I'll do it. I'll do it. I'll just figure it out. But puppetry classes, amazingly, at the time that I was there, I graduated in 1993. I think to be a puppet major as an undergrad, you had to take maybe 4 or 6 classes, not many, over 8 semesters. What I did was I audited everything I could. I was just there all the time. I remember one time Bart, because he was coming from the professional world into the teaching world, he had a responsibility, he had a job, he had a gig he had to do, and I'm like, well, can I come along? Can I ride shotgun? Can I see what it's like? He goes, oh yeah, and he gave me all these crazy road dog tips, like as you're leaving your gig and the sponsor's giving you the check, look around to see where the banks are and see if they're open in case you got to check. Keep an eye on which banks and where the sponsor's check is from in case. He goes, if you need to get a gas card, get lots of them from different ones, because if one month you can't pay one of them off, then it won't be one big debt. It'll be lots of little debt. I'm like, yeah, this is great. And I'm in financial debt to this day because of his advice. But it was something that you don't get from the formalized acting class. Yeah, UConn was amazing. I learned as much from the students as I did from the professor. And the time that I was there, Tim Lagasse was up and coming, and he had gone to the national festival and won an Unima citation for his show of hands. And I'm like, I'm hitching my wagon to that guy. And so we ended up being like we did a lot of fun stuff together in and out of college. But yeah, that's part of the college experience. What was the question? I'm gonna be bad.
Well, no, just what other things did you learn while you were there? Other classes.
I learned that puppetry is a fraternity. And I learned that anybody, even a newbie like me, could go up at a puppet festival and sit and listen to some of the greatest puppet people, the really working puppeteers, the stage working puppeteers. Not only that, but if you had beer, they would come to your room and tell you more stories. And Tim and I hosted a lot of wonderful I Hate Barney party we had one year, and everybody had to stomp on the little Barney plush that we had before they could come in and drink our beer. But yeah, I learned what a fraternity it was. The thing that made me want to go become a puppeteer was during the shadow puppet class, I saw Richard Bradshaw from Australia. He is my hero. And and I just said that's what I want to do, and I immediately started ripping off all his stuff, copying, like literally building his things to figure out how they worked. Well, by the end of my senior year, he came to UConn. I met him and performed a 5 minute vignette. And as my professor tells it, I don't quite remember it this way, but Richard, after I performed, came backstage and we were back there for 10 minutes. And like people like, where did Richard go? Where's Nappy? And it was because why did you do it like that? I'm like, no, I ask you the questions. You don't ask me the questions, Mr. Bradshaw. So that kind of being able to go right to the source of what you admire, the fraternal, people will tell you a lot of information that they've spent a lot of years gleaning just so that you could stand on their shoulders. And that's one of the great things about puppetry and the organizations Puppeteers of America and UNIMA. That all started at UConn. UConn was definitely the place that you could make contact because people know about it. But also from whatever energy you put out, that's what you get back.
Excellent. Would you recommend UConn for up and coming puppeteers who want to learn more about the craft?
It's not a bad thing to do. It depends on your person, depends on your situation and if you want and your finances and stuff. I know somebody that really should have gone to UConn and was not admitted, and they've gone on to do their own thing and they do it really well. So it's once again, would I recommend it? This is bad. I'm sorry, Bart and UConn. No, just for the fact that you could go there, but you don't have to. I also think, you can take online classes to see if it's right for you. So I think you can audit classes or take things online. But yes, it's if you want to immerse yourself for 4 years as an undergrad, but it's a liberal arts college at UConn, so you're going to be taking statistics and science and English, writing, literature, or 2 years as one master's degree, or 3 years as another master's degree. But yeah, you will learn tools, materials, you'll meet people, you'll make contacts. It's a good way to start. There's no doubt about it.
Excellent.
So
Excellent.
yes and no.
Well, these days you're known, as being a shadow puppet artist. What is it about shadow puppetry that really captivated you and has stuck with you this long?
Shadow puppets tickle a little lizard part way back in our primitive brain. There is something mysterious and all puppets are icons, and all puppets have a certain ritual. But shadow puppets in particular immediately grab you. I think what I learned from Richard Bradshaw's simple, marvelous designs is that the less detail that you can include, the more you gauge your audience, because the audience fills in the details. We as human beings are really good at recognizing patterns and all. So if you leave major things out, people will put them in with their brains, and that's really and the audience is immediately engaged. And then just being able to see Richard do these very funny, sarcastic, wonderful transformations. One thing turns into another. Um, that was really appealing. And also, there's a history. I believe that shadow theater is the oldest kind of puppetry. And so there's this history and this culture from all over the world, from China, from Turkey and Greece. Um, from France, that being the newer style, only 300 years old, the French being the young whippersnappers, and then so on. So there's all these wonderful things that people have done that I could look at and exploit to my benefit. But yeah, it's magical and cinematic, and even though there's a barrier between you and the audience, a good performer will listen to their audience, and so it's super interactive. And that's a wonderful thing. The audience is the best director a puppeteer could ever hope for. You listen to that audience, and they will tell you what is good and what is funny.
I love that. That's excellent. And I think you can apply that to any type of puppetry.
Absolutely.
Really.
Yeah.
Yeah. You graduated from UConn. Where does your career take you after that? What did you do after school?
After school, uh, my finishing school in May, I went to the National in 1993 in San Francisco and had my mind blown yet again. Amazing festival, the National Puppeteers of America Festival in San Francisco. But I also auditioned for a company called Bits and Pieces, giant 9 foot tall body puppets. And because of my movement training, I thought that's a good fit. And I met them there and we seemed to click. And so I went with Bits and Pieces. And in late August, I was driving down to Tampa, Florida, where they were housed. And I learned a show and went on the road early September. And I worked with Bits and Pieces for 2 years, and they took me all around the country, primarily east of the Mississippi, but all the way up to like Wisconsin, but mostly in the South. We did off Broadway and Symphony Space, New York, and they were great. Um, yeah, I did it for 2 years. They took me to Japan 3 times and Taiwan once. They did one international trip a year. So I was working with them for 2 years, got 2 trips. And then the third year after I left them, they're like, nobody does it as good as you. And our new guys they're not, will you come to Japan again? I'm like, oh, yes, I will. Thank you very much. So it's always good to work your hardest and leave on good terms. And always, that whole time in 2 years, there were some interesting times, some problems and bumps, but there was always something to learn. But it was also, sorry, it sounds like a finish, but it was also very difficult because I was them. I was their company. And I knew that I was going to do my own thing, but I always wanted to be very careful about not sniping their contacts. And so that was hard sometimes because I knew that I was going to do my own thing, but it wouldn't be cool. It wouldn't be karmatically proper for me to be talking to people that they were booking with. And it turns out that it was a whole different ball of wax, because Bits and Pieces did thousands, 1,000 people per performance, or 800 or 300, because of those 9 foot tall body puppets. Best shape of my life. Thank you, Bits and Pieces. After Bits and Pieces, I came back home to Connecticut. I lived with another UConn person, and I did substitute teaching, which we were talking about recently. And that was when I got fired twice from substitute teaching. I don't know how that happened. They brought me back and fired me again at another time. But I was sub teaching, and this is a really good idea if you can stomach it, folks. Substitute teaching. It lets you work day by day without having the refinements of a work schedule, so that if you're trying to gig, you can say no to subbing and take your gig, and then if you have to, you could sub. So that was really, really good. I worked for a party service. I started off as a DJ and a karaoke DJ, and I ended up doing like Velcro wall jumping, and they started selling to like college campus stuff. So we're doing like inflatable, those jump houses with twister and bouncy boxing. And once those inflatable things started working up to 600, 800 pounds, and I said, oh, do you need somebody to fix that equipment? And then I kind of step aside and did a lot of sewing for them to fix these crazy things. But lots of little jobs along the way. Ultimately, I ended up living with Tim Lagasse, and he was working for the Hensons in Nickelodeon, I believe, The Wobulous World of Dr. Seuss. And I was subbing and starting to really dig into Nappy's puppets. I think by the end of that year, I ended up working at Foxwoods Resort and Casino in Connecticut, and I had a 5 foot tall fox puppet that I would do with my hand as a Muppet style puppet, and I had one live hand for the fox to shake people's hands and do what I needed to do, and a Napoleon or stuffed hand, but he had a vest that went around both of us, and then my legs were his legs. And I would walk around the casino, and nobody wanted to talk to me. By golly, they all had to go to work, and I'm making the slot machine arm gesture. They didn't want to talk to me. That was really good for learning how to engage people and to listen to them and say, no, this person doesn't want to play with me. This person's bored, and they'll play with me. And during that time, or before that time, I met Leslie Carrera, and Leslie was working on The Wobulous World of Dr. Seuss. And Tim and I had a tradition of going out into Christmas time and doing the windows in the big stores like the Macy's. We'd film and make this silly running commentary, a la MST3K. And one year Leslie just met us, and she was carrying this giant reindeer, and she is a hoot. And so we started playing together. At some point during February, we had a shadow theater. Tim is such a good instigator, and I like playing with him. And our paths have not been able to stay together, but it's always such good memories thinking of Tim. Tim and I had a shadow, it was a Groundhog's Day party. And if you came to our party, you had to bring a shadow puppet show, and Leslie brought this wonderful little show, and so many people brought a show. It was hilarious and wonderful. Um, so that takes us to about 1997, 96. Tim moved to New York, and I moved to an apartment and was continuing Foxwoods, saving as much money as I could for the day that I could say, no, I don't want to do this anymore. And when I did that, that's when I made a full-time swing to Nappy's Puppets and started doing school assemblies and preschools and nursery schools, that's preschool, and birthday parties. And so Nappy's Puppets started to pick up. And then I got the call for Between the Lions, which is a wonderful show on PBS. Very good show. First guest, inaugural Under the Puppet guest Tyler Bunch, and I worked on that show with Tim and Jennifer Barnhart and Kathy Mullen and Anthony Asbury. And it all came down to they needed people because there were so many productions going on. I just lucked out. They were shooting The Book of Pooh, and they were shooting something else, and they were shooting Sesame Street, and they were shooting Between the Lions, and so they just needed big, warm bodies. And I was on Miss Kathy Mullen's radar as a shadow puppeteer, and so because Between the Lions wanted to have all kinds of puppets, not just the normal moving mouth, hand, and rod ones, and so I was deemed the shadow expert and got to play with that. But I also got to be an assistant puppeteer, and that was a union job. And boy, oh boy, and then I saved all that money and put a deposit on a house and got married and had kids, got divorced. I still have that house, but I don't live there anymore. And back to Nappy's Puppets. I did go back to substitute teaching for a brief stint because child support is a thing. And my ex was wonderful about it, but I did not want to be late on the money I owed her. I met a guy that does a bubble show, and for the last 3 years, I've been doing bubble performance for Bubblemania. Casey Carle and Bubblemania, and he does the older kids, and it's a very science-based show, and I do the younger preschool kids, and it's just a hoot. And that's my career in a nutshell until we figure out what's next.
Well, and in backing up a little bit, in 1999, you were an emerging artist at the National Puppetry Conference at the O'Neill. How did that come about?
Um, how did that come about? My arm had to be twisted. I was invited to be an emerging artist. Pam Marciero wasn't the artistic director just yet, as she is now, but I think she was in charge of the emerging artists. And she says, "Nappy, you got to do it. You got to try it. It'll be good for you." And so I decided to do a tabletop, like oh boy, the FedEx book where these tabletop puppets can be picked up and moved, American Bunraku style tabletop, but then they can also be lowered down and self-standing. And I said, that'll be a neat thing. And that's something I've never done. And I told this wonderful copyrighted story that about three sumo wrestlers and three strong women. I'm sorry, it was three strong women. A wonderful story by Klaus Stamm. And I worked with the fantastic puppeteers of Flock Theater at the O'Neill. But yeah, they asked me, and I eventually said yes, and I did it. And I never, I mean, it was a great experience, but I don't. Actually, those puppets ended up going with over to Art Gruenberger, who did that. And so that was a kind of neat connection. I had forgotten about that connection because we had other connections later down the line. But I have done the O'Neill, the National Puppet Conference. I was the second year I was there, and George Latshaw was the guest artist, and Richard Termine was a guest artist. And so I have done the O'Neill every which configuration. I've been a participant, a guest artist, uh, wait a minute, a participant, an emerging artist, which is what we were just talking about in '99. I've been a member of Flock, where I went and volunteered my time to do the emerging artist pieces. And I've been on Tech Crew. And this year, because of the way things happened in 2020, I was a guest artist slash teacher, and I taught 10 people, students, cyber shadow theater. But because the O'Neill is in Connecticut and an amazing program, I've always tried to be a part of it one way or another.
So definitely you would recommend that for puppeteers to
Yeah,
go check out.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's an amazing program in a marvelous, beautiful setting and intense. You know, you eat, sleep, and dream puppetry. Um, and just if you do go there, just be open to pushing past your limits and listening to others and knowing that everybody there wants to see you do great things and they'll bend over backwards to help you make that happen. Because it's so intense, there are things such as Weepy Wednesday, where halfway through people kind of. Grant, you've been there, yeah? You were part of the Lollywagon,
Yeah, I went
yeah,
I went once, yeah.
yeah.
It
So
was it's an amazing place, yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about developing your shows and these shows that you take around and have performed. Where do you find the inspiration for your shows?
oh man, that's like a nightmare question. I don't know. I have no idea. Each one is a little bit different, and some of them come so quickly and easily, and some of them are like pulling teeth and take forever. This year, I finally did something that I've been wanting to do for 3 years, and then I never performed it. It's all built and ready to go, and I haven't done it still. But it's all next. It's a Halloween piece, so it's just seasonal. But that was one of the things I was thinking that I gotta like make myself do more new content. I make one new piece a year, and it's very frustrating and it's very scary because I've reached a certain point that people know my work and expect the incongruity and they expect the look, the certain look, that I'm like, how am I going to top myself? And I've let that keep me from experiencing the joy of just making stuff. And I'm always like, well, if I spend all this time making it, am I going to be able to put it in my show? Because I've made some slam pieces, which are adult short form experimental puppet slams. And I'm like, well, that was great, but I can only do it at slams. I can't do it at birthday parties. So I get these kind of freezing things that stop me. But in one case, I don't, my here's a question. Here's a thing. Monkeys jumping on the bed, which I was so glad to have done, is like my signature piece. Until recently, I started every single show, no matter what the title, with monkeys jumping on the bed. It was a great warm up. It gets the audience ready, makes them listen, it makes them, just get into the puppet show, and it's a darn, darn funny piece. 12 years ago, somebody contacted me and said that I should not do monkeys jumping on the bed. And they also bashed me about the word nappy. And this was just after Don Imus and his put the foot in the mouth. And I got into a debate with this person. I was so sad that they just couldn't see what I was trying to do. Subsequently, I start each show now with "Hello, my name is Jim Napolitano. My friends call me Nappy," and that's why I named my puppet company. This summer, doing shows at libraries after all the 2020 awakening of Black Lives Matter, it was came up again that you shouldn't do monkeys jumping on the bed. As far as I can tell, there's nothing explicitly tying it back to anti-race feelings, but it's close enough to other things that it triggers people. And so I just feel heartbroken because there's a piece of my show and a signature. And is it okay to do? And I looked very closely at the response of somebody showing it recently, and people were laughing and commenting positively, and then one person said like, "That makes me sad," or something, and I'm like, "Oh, all right, I just gotta not do this anymore," and that's a shame. Another inspiration for a piece that is happy is The Five Little Ducks. I was working with Liz Joyce for her puppet theater, Goat on the Boat, and we were having lunch with a friend of hers who had like a 3-year-old kid. And while they were waiting for their food at this restaurant, they were singing Five Little Ducks, but they didn't know how to count. So first it was 5, then it was 1, then it was 27, then it was, and I go, that's very funny. And how can I do that? And so I built this little vignette of 5 little ducks, and I throw in a hippopotamus, and everybody goes, "There's no hippopotamus in this song." And I say, "What? Can't you see it? It's right there. There's the hippopotamus. It's right. What are you talking about?" And so that was the inspiration. Just some kid being a kid and wonderful, creative, joyful nonsense.
Oh, 3 little ducks went out one day over the hills and far away. Mama duck said quack, 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 and only two little ducks came back with the hippopotamus.
Richard Bradshaw is a huge inspiration. And I mean, literally, I said it before, I was making his pieces to learn. And if I ever ran short, uh, I would slip in one of his pieces. Um, and he knows this, I believe, because I was his teaching assistant one year at the National. And he goes, "Oh, I didn't bring any of my puppets. I didn't know we were going to have show and tell." I said, which ones do you want? I got about 60% of your show, Richard. I'll bring them up for you. And it was scary to work for Richard Bradshaw, and I was like, "Yes, Mr. Bradshaw," and he was just breaking my stones. And that's how you do it, Nappy? Oh, I guess that works. I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" And then I started banging back at Richard, which was a lot of fun, but I always was scared. At one point he was going, "Oh, that was too far, Nappy." um, but anything silly, like I try and read stories to find good shadow puppet bits, and I will have to read 40 or 50 of these fairy tales or little things, and it takes that many to find the seed of one. I've also had people, and I love when this happens, people give me a story and say, "I thought of you when I read this." And then I can build this story for the person who wanted to see the story. And that happens a lot while I'm performing too. I always imagine Marty Robinson might be in the audience because I know Marty. I've house sat for him and ate his food, um, swam in his pool, or somebody, just anybody I know. I wonder what they would think of this while I'm performing for a bunch of preschoolers, and it just makes it sharp and clear. But it came to me after the last 10 years. I'm like, no, I'm performing for the audience. And one of the things you got to keep in mind, and the inspiration behind all of this and just making people laugh, is that I might be dealing with a kid who is with me for 45 minutes, but I have no idea what their life is before or after my show. But if I can get them to forget about anything that's troubling them for 30 minutes, 20 minutes, 5 minutes of my 45-minute show, I like to think that's a gift, and it's really, really what I try to keep in mind when I'm trying to make things happen. Recently joined Instagram and put in my bio, I like to make shadow puppets and make as many people squirt milk out their nose as possible. And I think that's my new mission statement.
I love it. That's perfect. Now you said you like build a show a year. Does it take a whole year to build a show and get it ready to perform?
I shouldn't have said show. I mean vignette. 2 to 5
Vignette,
minutes.
okay.
2 to
Well,
5
that's the other thing I
minutes.
wanted to ask, because you do have these little vignettes. Are they all interchangeable? Can you just say like, "Oh, I'm going to put this one in this show" and everything?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. If I'm doing a residency, like let's say, for example, the wonderful Puppet Showplace in Brookline, Massachusetts, that when I was a newbie and I got invited to perform there, I thought, I've made it. The Showplace wants me to come there. And I've been performing for over 15 years, I would expect, maybe longer. I do 2 shows a day for 3 days. I keep things, I swap things in and out because the audience doesn't know, and it just keeps me sharp and fresh. And so sometimes the ushers will go, "Wait, you didn't do that last time." I'm like, "No, I do this now," or I swap things in and out. Um, which is the vignettes is a Richard Bradshaw idea, and it's just a beautiful idea because it's 3 to 5 minutes. So it's like the weather in New England. If you don't like it, wait a minute, and you'll get a new vignette and see how that one goes. And I kind of cheat or whatever. I think I cheat because the shadow screen is so cinematic, and all the kids who are watching my show have been trained in watching television for a long time, so they know how to watch TV, and they want that little break of turning the light off, letting them decompress, and then turning the light out. And so the vignettes are good. And, for the last 3 or 5 years, I've been filling my time with crafting. I've been sewing patches for a long time, ever since Bits and Pieces days. And I've been making jewelry and dragon eyes. So I'm making things, but not necessarily shadow theater. I kind of thought after when my kids came, my first child who's now 13, I'm like, all right, I've got the formula. I'm just going to coast on this so I could take care of my family. And that's what I do. And I'll do any kind of puppetry that anybody will let me or wants me to. But shadows are my thing, and I have enough experimental ones that don't get heavy rotation. But if somebody's seen my show a lot, I'll slip in 3 or 4 new pieces. The vignette formula is great because if you have a weak piece, a new piece that's not as strong, I can slide it in between 2 surefire killers, and then we can make them forget about the stanky one.
Well, as you're working it out, as you're developing it, yeah.
And you can't develop it until you've done it 50 or 100 times. And so the first handful of times, the first double handful of times you perform a new piece, for me, it's agony, and the puppets are fighting you. And I've got a puppet that I built in 1999. It was while I was doing Between the Lions. It's Old Mother Hubbard. I've replaced every other puppet but Old Mother Hubbard because she is just worn in, and I know how she's going to move. And it's true. The puppets will tell you what they want to do, what they don't want to do, and if you pay attention. And even though I've done some of these things, these vignettes for 15 years or more, I've been performing for 25 years, I believe. Every time the audience reacts to something that I've never heard before, that makes me stop and analyze it, and then makes me start moving the puppets and doing different rhythms and tempos and trying to find a new joke. And the best kind of laugh to get is that roller coaster, so I know where the high crescendo of everybody's going to laugh at this, and then let them come down and say a little snide remark or do something else to get them to come back up again and then go back down. And so all these pieces I've been doing so long, I've found just about every moment that I can in them. I always thought improv was almost cheating before I understood it, I guess. But it seems like you just take every scenario or every possible thing that somebody could say and have a little map in your back pocket. But that's before I learned how to listen. You're supposed to listen. I guess that's what my ex-wife told me. I don't know. I don't listen to anything she says.
Oh, well, you have a lot of great shows that you tour around, and Father Goose's Tales and the Halloween show, and you have a Christmas show. But you also have one called Shadows Around the World, which is sort of a history educational show about shadow theater.
Yeah, I remember being a student and telling David Zarodiak of National Marionette Theater, I'm like, wouldn't it be great to have like a caveman coming back from a hunt and that fire and he's doing the shadow puppet show and then it was more the history of puppet evolution as I understood it, and then they put on a mask and they're shamans and all of a sudden the mask get hands and now they're marionettes. And Zarodiak said, don't do that artsy fartsy crap. And so I needed another show, and I had this wonderful history of shadow theater, and I just did it from my perspective. I studied it, and I still read books on shadow theater. But I also tell the audience at the very beginning, this is the essence of the flavor. This is my interpretation. You should look at it for yourself. There's lots of stuff on the internet. You go on the internet with a big person and you can learn about Chinese. So it's not 100% accurate, is what I tell the kids, but it's fun. There's Indonesian shadow theater is hundreds of years old and epic in length. They start when the sun goes down and they play all night shadow theater till the sun comes back up. People eat, people go to sleep during the boring lovey-dovey parts. So I took that tradition and squished it down into 3 to 5 minutes, basically giving them the gist of it, but also at the same time performing the Stinky Cheese Man instead of the Ramayana, which I met John Shetska, and I think I have a verbal understanding with him. I could do it. I got to perform the Stinky Cheese Man for John Shetska and Lane Smith, the author illustrator, and some other wonderful people one time. And when I got the call for that, they said, "We understand you have a version of Stinky Cheese Man." Oh yeah, I says, "That's something I did in college. I guess I could get it up." Meanwhile, I had been doing it for quite a long while, but I don't call the show the Stinky Cheese Man show. So
Right.
if somebody has to sue me, they get like 1/12 of. They're only a small part of my show.
But of all the things that the Chinese people invented, I think the most interesting might be shadow puppets. A long time ago in the country of China, there stood the palace of the emperor, Emperor Wu Ti.
Well, speaking of shows, are you your own booking agent, or do you have an agent?
I am my own booking agent, and I'm the worst secretary in the world as well. That's what I tell everybody when I make a mistake. Oh, I'll talk to the secretary. Um, I tried a booking agent a couple of different times. One guy was not really kosher, and another person didn't quite get it, which was really unusual because they represented other puppet acts. And maybe that's a problem because I wasn't the only puppeteer. Somebody told me that once. But nobody's going to sell my show like me. And I'm a terrible businessman. And but I'm a pretty good performer, and so I will always try to do anything I can. This is an example of what not to do as your own booking agent, kids. I'm on something called GigSalad, and GigSalad is like the lowest bidder wins. People go on, they want a clown or a puppet show, and they want to find who will give them the lowest price and give them what. But I think they knew who I was, but they only wanted like 20 minutes. It was a birthday party for a 1 year old. And already you could see I have no hair, but I was pulling my hair out. And I said, okay, let me see. I need the money. And I think I negotiated down to 50. I said $50, 20 minutes. I'm online. I don't have to go anywhere. I'm not doing anything. I did that this past Saturday. 2 days later on Monday, today, somebody called me up. It's a library gig that was at that party. So that's how I'm my own booking agent, by being good enough that people go away going, I want to see that again, and I want to do that. But I am my own booking agent, and I just send out a lot of postcards when I can afford the stamps. I've just this year started doing email blasts um, from people who have emailed me first. Like
Right.
I just have all my emails since 1997, believe it or not, and I just go through them. And so yeah, it's hard. I was fortunate enough and happy to have taken Art's Art Gruenberger's class about business, and it was a lot of philosophy, but it was also a lot of great stuff. I think we did 4 weeks on a couple hours each Sunday. And so here I am 25 years into it, taking classes from a contemporary because you got to. You
Yeah.
got to. Thank goodness for Mr. Chad Williams of Wonderspark, who at the beginning of everything going online was able to say, okay, let's have classes, and gave us all kinds of resources and equipment to consider. And just always learning, always learning.
Yeah. How would you, what would you suggest to a puppeteer when they're, they're going to perform at libraries and in schools and things like that, when it comes to setting their rate? Like, what advice do you have to a performer who, who's just starting out? And it's like, I think artists are always in that position of like, I don't know what to charge.
It's really hard, and I undervalue my work, so don't do what I do. I've got a thing going on right now with certain clients going, name your price. I've had 3 jobs this December. Please, for the love of God, hire me on a cyber thing, and you pay me whatever you want, because I know that I'll get another job from it. So how do you do your own price? A lot of it has to do with where you are and what people are paying for other things. So a great way to do it and along is make friends with other people in your line of work in your area and talk to them honestly. And I there were times when I would call people up pretending that I was going to hire them for a birthday party to get a rate, and that's not good because you end up running into them again. Um, it's a hard equation. I mean, my dad always gave me bologna sauce about you're going 3 hours to Boston and you're getting this much. Is it worth it? And I said, well, if I don't do it, then I get $0. So yeah, it's worth it. Um, Before you start worrying about money, have a good show. Once you have a good show, do it wherever you can. I don't think it's a problem for you to ask your sponsor, give them a price that you feel is fair. And if they say that's too much, let them come up with the next step. It's sneaky negotiations, but you will discount yourself much more than the sponsor will. And so I don't know if that makes sense, but you give your price and then let the sponsor give the next price, because they'll go, can you do any better? And you ask the sponsor, well, what's your budget? What were you thinking? And if it's really, really low, you have to think, well, do you want to do it? Is there a way you could do a shorter, easier show? But yeah, I can I say what I charge? Do you want me to do? I have no trouble.
I'm not asking that specifically, but
Yeah.
if you would like
I
to,
would
you
be
can.
happy to, and it's wildly different. Libraries, 350 in Connecticut. That I think is high end, but I know there are people getting more, but not as frequently. $350 for a 45-minute show for a library performance in Connecticut. Now, I'm very lucky to be in an area that I can get to Philadelphia and Boston within a 3-hour radius. So, to go outside for a library of Connecticut, I ask for $450. For Connecticut, inside or outside of Connecticut, I always let the librarians know that if they can find another job, and when things are busy, it has to be on the same day so they don't go back and forth 2 different days. They can find another job for me. I'll give both of the people block booking, $100 off, and that way you've made them your booking agent, and they'll work for that $100. And sometimes it comes into a trifecta, and you get 3 instead of 1. So that's a good thing. Um, I also do library performances in person. I've done it in a very close town for a special for as low as $75 because I wasn't doing anything, and I see the problem with going low, folks, is that you might get a call for a higher gig. So but once I make a contract, I stick to it. I was invited down to America's Got Talent in Florida, and they wanted to fly me and do this and come on audition. I was pretty sure I wasn't going to win America's Got Talent. They just wanted something very visual. But I told them I have a residency with performances and workshops. And they're like, well, can't you reschedule? And I said, yeah, I could, but they were first. They got me, and I honor that. And I know other people that change it around and try and get other people. And not only does that give the sponsor a hard time, but you're giving other artists a hard time, because then the sponsor calls her other artists and she gets them. Everybody's got to shift over. It's not musical chairs. It's a business. So stick to your word and do your job. And if you asked for not enough money this time, make a note of that.
Yeah, I did library shows, not with puppetry, but with music, songs, for a couple of years. And I booked a gig in Burbank at the library, and I was going to do 2 libraries, or 3 of the Burbank. There's 3 Burbank libraries. I was going to do them one right after another, which is great. I live in Burbank. And I got a Henson thing. I got a Puppet Up thing. And I was like, I'm so sorry I can't do this one gig. And she was like, all right. And she canceled all the gigs, and I never worked in Burbank again. You know what I mean? Like puppet wise, but that was the lesson of I had committed to them first, and I should have stuck with them, because that affected me longer than, just doing this one, thing for him, which I thought was like, no, I can't say no to Henson. It's like, yes, you can. It's okay.
You can. There are lots of other people waiting to take the Henson job, and Henson comes along, a Henson-like job comes along once every now and again, but a library might have you back once every year for 15 years. I've got people I've been doing 18 years. We can't even remember how long I've been, we talk about it and laugh, but they're like, oh, you had hair when you first came here. Very funny.
Well, you've recently been doing online shows. Were you doing online shows before the pandemic, or is that new?
That is new. It started in April. Also, really trying to garner my Facebook thing and then my YouTube page by putting past performances. And whenever I do a show online, because it's a necessity, there was many weeks, this is not going to be evergreen, but there were many weeks where I didn't have any money before unemployment kicked in, that I just had to get a job. I leave those things up for them to see, and I tell them, a week or a month, but a lot of those performances are still up there, because if anybody sees it, I hope they're going to want it. But
yeah,
I find the performing online to be adequate. It gives me a reason to get up in the morning, because I do love to perform, and I miss the audience response, but not so dearly that I can't do online performances. And I've tried to find ways to do it. I do the 5 little ducks, and I give the audience the part where the mama duck goes quack, 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 quack. And I ask them if they want to unmute their microphones and do that part. And it's hilariously it's just so many voices in a cacophony, and it makes me laugh every time. And somebody said, like, if I see a kid with a pacifier, I'll make a comment, or I see, oh, that's a nice silver birthday party, and the parents just bug out their eyes and then tell the kid, he's talking about you. And these are the littlest things to make it just different than watching a video, but people really appreciate that. And so it's been fun. I found a lot of great things to do, and looking at what everybody's doing it and how they're doing it and who's still doing it and who's not doing it. I was just tickled pink by Paint by Monster, and he was going for a good long time, and he's trying to refigure himself out. So he's been off for a couple of months now, and I miss him dearly. That's why I'm stalking you, Grant, because Paint by Monster's not doing anything right now.
Yeah, he's I love Paint by Monster. Russ Walco, I don't know if you know Russ Walco, but I had stumbled across Paint by Monster and Russ Walco and this was years ago, in Jersey City in a hotel room. And I go, right before I left, I found this Paint by Monster. And then here was 2 grown men in a hotel room, like just crying ourselves with him as that monster yelling at Halloween trick-or-treaters, If you've seen that video on his website, like we watched that like yeah, he's amazing. He's fantastic.
And such an amazing career to be doing these puppet shows. He's been a nationally syndicated cartoonist and done environmental cartooning for. I was talking to him for. I mean. And he was doing Monster just because it brought him joy. And he had people that relied on him and people that would show up. And I just think that sense of community is wonderful. And I haven't, up until this very recent time, I've always been like, I don't want people to know who I am as Jim Napolitano. I am just Nappy to them. And, Facebook, why? I don't want people to know. And I'm doing shows, but people can't come to them because they're private shows. So what do I need? And now it's like whenever I put up something recently about a health issue and I got an incredible response. And sometimes you just need that. And as long as it doesn't become every other post where I'm crying about something, and I'm giving more happiness than I'm asking for. I'm really happy to be doing that now. And it's just something new to figure out. And I think you have to keep learning. Ultimately, that's what's going to keep us from getting old. We're going to get old, but our minds don't have to get old. And I hear people like Chris Hardwick say, if you keep learning about new things, then you'll stay vital, and that'll keep you going longer. So that's that.
Well, as we're wrapping up here, I did want to ask about 2 TV things that you worked on. And the first one is your first TV gig, Wienerville.
It's way back there. Actually, before that might have been Stick Stickly. Do you remember?
Yeah.
Stick Stickly was an interstitial character, which was basically a popsicle stick. And I was just making stuff and props. I very rarely got to manipulate anything. But yeah, that was one of my firsts as well. Mark Weiner was an amazing, fun guy, but also a very interesting fellow to work with. You had to get permission. Like, I couldn't ask for his puppet to build a costume for it. I had to go give it puppet measurements, and I had to take my tape measure and measure stuff to make costumes for it. And then, I'm sorry, Mark, I'm going to say this. And then in between takes on set, he would just sling the puppet off of his arm into a chair or whatever. And I'm like, oh, I couldn't touch it. I couldn't keep it at my desk. But you could just throw the hecker out of it. I'd be like, don't throw the puppet like that.
Everyone's a member of that meeting in November when democracy is put on display. So get ready, let's move this dog slatty! Get ready for election day!
But yeah, we did 2 specials, and Tim just sent me, one of them's on Boing Boing, the Wienerville Hanukkah special, where I met Mark Summers, and I got him to crack up because he was saying something, and somebody made a comment like, "What's it like now that you're not part of the network?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that's what we call him, old over the wall Summers," because Mark Summers had left Nickelodeon to do like a drive-in or a food show. But he wasn't part of the family anymore. I met David Johansen, who was playing Ebuchadnezzar, I think, or a wise guy, and he was in this Moses robe and crazy wig and beard, and he came walking off a set, and he's like, "Oh no," he's patting his, and I said, "Oh, I'm sorry, kids." I said, "You need a smoke?" And David Johansen, Buster pointed. I said, "Oh, you know what I want, kid." So marvelous, fun. Crazy things. Yeah.
Well, and then the other one I wanted to ask you about is, I believe, is your most recent, or the most recent that was put out, was The Walking Dead World Beyond. Because that's just incredible, to shadow puppets on Walking Dead.
Shadow puppets on Walking Dead. Now,
so how did that come about?
Somebody at Henson and then Tim Lagasse reinforced them, and they called me, and I finagled my way into it, and holy cow, I had about 2 weeks to build, and yeah, I had to make a video for them to show that I could be creepy enough, and then they didn't want it to be so creepy. I'm like, I did what you asked for. You wanted creepy, and it was a whole the world beyond is a whole new kind of rules to what's going on, and they didn't want to tell me, but I couldn't do certain things because I had never watched Walking Dead, so I immediately started watching it.
Once upon a time, there was the world as we knew it. A world with pets and homes, grocery stores and hospitals, jobs and weekends. And then everything changed. The people died and then returned, neither living nor dead.
And yeah, I can tell you stories. Shall I tell you stories? Jim Kroupa was lovely enough to go down to Virginia with me and help me save my bacon so many times, kept me sane. Every step of the way, they made it more and more difficult. So in the storyboarding, I heard about a truck. And if you've seen the episode 6, you see that it's all about this kind of army truck, which is a big deal. But this guy who is a performer and a magician and a shadow puppeteer apparently has a screen off the side of his truck. And the screen is ridiculously large. And the truck and the screen and the rig is like ridiculously hard. And then we got onto location and it was on an incline. So now, and there are brambles everywhere. So we can't bring in stands and stuff. And somebody says, "Do you want to get this truck out of there?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'd like to try it without the truck." And they take the truck in and they bring these big jacks that take up more room than the truck to hold the screen up. Why are we on location at 2 in the morning on some Virginia hillside when we could just as easily be doing this in the studio? And yeah, it was tough. It was very tough and very scary and a lot riding on it. And I had some wonderful people, if I may shout out Jim Kroupa, Cactus Head Puppets, John and Megan Regan helped me build pre-production. And a guy named Kevin Morelli who made a wonderful light source, a battery operated light source that let me do an overhead projector with no overhead projector. It was all done in layers in real time. And it was the most wonderful, perfect light source that I could ask for that the director of photography wouldn't let me use until he couldn't do what I needed him to do. And that was just so many battles. And that's why I like live theater and I like controlling it all. It was marvelous. And it was over a year ago that I did it. So I almost forgot about it. And then I sure did milk it when it came out. They edited me to look really good, but there were bugs flying on the shadow screen. I'm like, do I shoo them? Do I smush them? That'd be really creepy. And,
Yeah, because I watched a clip of it and there's like a spider at one point you can see crawling on the thing. And I was like, oh, wow, that's really interesting. I'll have to ask him if that was on purpose.
Trained that spider. It took me months and months. I called him Harry. He only bit me a little bit. Yeah, it was something, and it was a union shoot, and that's always good. But live theater is for me where I want to be. And if I live like a pauper and I'm just barely able to pay my bills, I can do it my way. With television, it's marvelous. You can tell such wonderful stories with television, but there's so many people and so much wasted time and so many cooks. It's just not for me. That immediate feedback of performing live, you're doing good. When you have to do something for television more than 3 times, nobody's laughing anymore, unless you throw something really, really crazy into the mix. So that's the thing. Yeah, The Walking Dead was marvelous, and I'm so sad that I spent my money a year ago. It was nice, and I got to pay everybody pretty well, and that's always good. And yeah, there's one more season of it, but I don't know what's going on with that character, if he's ever going to do another shadow puppet show. I loved watching the reaction videos for that. The people are just, what the heck? And what is this? They didn't like the shadows because they show it at the very beginning of the show. And they're like, why are they explaining something we all know? What is this, a Spider-Man reboot yet again? And by the end of it, it all ties back, and people were like, oh, and they liked it. That was very gratifying to watch these reaction videos, because I got a big ego and I needed to be satisfied. So I was finally, because one more bad story about it. We were out in the middle of the woods. There was this giant crane holding a giant light. And as we got the last shot, they started dimming the light, so everybody would have to go faster to clean up. And we're in the middle of the dark woods, and it's scary, and there's zombies. And then finally they just turn them off. And then we just drive away. Like people said nice or whatever. And they're like, oh, and then we had a trailer at the beginning. And when we drove back to our trailer, it was locked and the whiteboard had our names removed. I'm like, all right, I guess we just shake the dust from our boots and move on. But yeah, it was an ordeal. They were shooting until 3:30, 4:30 in the morning. So that was good. But I met, what character was it? Abraham from the original Walking Dead, the red Howdy Doody looking guy. He was the director.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he was cool. He had a lot of good sense. He said, "Can you do this?" And oh yeah, I didn't think you would know about that. And that's the easy way out. Yeah, that's the easy way out. So that was nice.
Yeah. Well, I think people should find out at least that the opening clip and then the clip later on in the episode where they show it, because it's really, really good. As we wrap up here, the final question I always love to ask is, what has been the highlight of your puppetry career so far?
There's so many. Meeting Richard Bradshaw as a student, and then this is over many years, and then being his teaching assistant later on, and then writing the introduction to his book on shadow puppetry. That's got to be one of them. Being able to support my family and only do puppetry, or 90% puppetry, that's a highlight that I'm grateful for all the time. Yeah. I can't know if there's any more. I can't think of any.
Those are two amazing things right there. I don't think
Oh, so many wonderful people, so many amazing laughs and guffaws and shocking, wonderful moments. Yeah. And festivals. I'm sorry, that I didn't complete that thought. Festivals and performances and slams. Yeah, and just being able to reach out and pick somebody's brain that maybe you barely know, and for them to reciprocate, or to be able to reciprocate, to teach some of these students. When I started, nobody knew what shadow puppetry was. They wouldn't. Oh, you'll never be able to do birthday parties with shadow puppets. And it's true. People would ask, do you have any real puppets? Real puppet? You mean more traditional puppet? Yes, more. They're the oldest, most traditional puppets. I'm not worth no soup for you. So that was interesting. But yeah, to see what people are doing, I've been able to teach a gaggle of students over a number of times, and they're doing their own thing. Oh, that's very gratifying. To have an old student perform for my current students this year, and they're going, wow, he's amazing. And I'm like, should we tell him? Like, Nappy was my teacher. And they're like, oh, we're going to be great too. Once again, about the ego. Can I ask to add one more thing?
Sure. What do you want to talk about?
Just this kind of mantra that I think I've developed recently, and I don't know if anybody else has, but tenacity trumps talent. That's all there is. If you work hard enough and are open, you'll get better. And so, as talented as you might be naturally, the tenacity to keep getting better, to stick with it, to try to learn, tenacity trumps talent.
I love that. There's the quote right there. Well, Jim, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us and being on the show. I really appreciate it.
It was my very great pleasure. This is my first podcast. I was so excited. Could you tell I was shaking?
No, but you did flying colors. It's perfect.
Thank you.
Many thanks to Jim Napolitano for being on this episode. For links to Nappy's puppets and some of the other things we discussed on the show, check out the show notes for this episode number 56, over at underthepuppet.com. Now it's time to announce the winner of episode 55's giveaway for a one-of-a-kind Under the Puppet Dowling puppet handmade by David Stevens of All Hands Productions. The question was, who was Willie Tyler opening for when Lester's body got misdirected by the airline company? And the answer was Sammy Davis Jr. And the winner is Robert Whitcraft. Congratulations, Robert. Your Dowling is on its way. Thanks to David Stevens from All Hands Productions for crafting a special doweling just for this giveaway. To get your very own doweling, visit David's Etsy store at etsy.com/shop/All Hands Productions. This episode, we're giving away a puppet deck. A puppet deck is a deck of cards where each of the cards have a fun monster face on one side. You fold the card along some pre-scored folds, and within seconds, you have your very own monster puppet ready to entertain friends. The back of each card contains spaces to fill out biographical information about your monster puppet, so you never forget your character. To be entered to win the puppet deck, all you have to do is answer this question about the episode you just heard. What was the name of the theater company where Nappy performed giant 9-foot-tall body puppets? When you find the answer, send it in an email to underthepuppet@gmail.com with the subject line giveaway, and you'll be entered to win. All entries for this giveaway must be received by February 15th, 2021. The winner will be chosen at random from all correct entries and be announced on the March 1st, 2021 episode of the show. One entry per household. Good luck. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of Under the Puppet. If you have questions, suggestions, or feedback about the show, call our voicemail line at 818-806-9604, or click the Call the Show button in the free Under the Puppet app for iOS or Android. You can also send an email to underthepuppet@gmail.com, or connect with the show on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram by searching for Under the Puppet. And don't forget to tell a friend about the show. Thank you so much for listening. This episode of Under the Puppet was edited by Steven Staver and features music by Dan Ring. Under the Puppet is a production of Saturday Morning Media and made possible by the Saturday Morning Media Patreon patrons who've gone to patreon.com/Saturday Morning Media and set up a monthly pledge for as little as $1 a month. Patrons get new episodes before they are released, behind-the-scenes information, and exclusive bonus episodes. If you'd like to support this show and the other fun content from Saturday Morning Media, become a patron. Head on over to patreon.com/Saturday Morning Media and set up your monthly pledge today. You can also tell a friend about the show or leave the show a review on Apple Podcasts. Thank you so much for listening. Under the Puppet is copyright 2020 Saturday Morning Media Grant Pachoco Executive Producer. All rights reserved. www.saturdaymorningmedia.com. Under the Puppet proudly presents The Adventures of Timmy the Tooth Reunion. In this almost 90-minute video, you will hear great stories from the cast and crew who brought this amazing puppet show to life. Plus, you'll see never-before-seen artwork and exclusive behind-the-scenes video. Under the Puppet's Timmy the Tooth Reunion is available right now at timmy.underthepuppet.com.
You've been listening to Saturday Morning Media. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.